Hello, I am John Najarian, and RebelCon 2022 is almost here. We do have a virtual pass. The virtual pass gives you full access to everything, all the streams, the live trading sessions, all of our fabulous keynote speakers. So to learn more about what's going on at RebelCon 2022, whether you're in person or virtual, check out marketrebellion.com/Dallas. Bang. Good to see you, everybody. Especially good to be here because I'm down in Puerto Rico, and I partially worried, Pete, that maybe I'd have a little trouble joining you. But the cell towers are still up. They've brought about 100,000 homes back on the power grid. Those of you who don't know, Puerto Rico got hit by Fiona, knocked the entire island, 3.4 million people without power. But then all the generators kicked on, Pete, and now they're bringing back 100,000 people at a time, or 100,000 homes at a time. So that's good news. All right, Pete, let's get started with the macro minute. We hit the highest 10 years since 2011, I think, today, 3.51. What do you think?
I think that the 10 years, what we should look at, we should use that as our barometer, and it's now at 3.5. So we've been saying it forever, right? You look at the 10 year, that's going to tell you everything. That's it. That's the macro minute. Giddy up.
Yep. We don't waste your time, folks. You know, you want somebody else to waste your time talking macro for 40 minutes or so. You can find plenty of that. But Pete, let's just hit these purple.
Yeah.
Now, I know this one because I just bought a bunch of beds for down here and things like that. Purple is a mattress company. It peaked, Pete, at $40 February of 2021. It was down way deep into the single digits. It was into the twos, as in $2. And then Coliseum Capital says, buy, 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 and the stock goes up 33%. But if you rode this one down, it's just like Store Capital. Ouch!
Well, when you say purple, John, you're talking to a guy in Viking world, and I actually played for the Vikings. So you say purple. Yeah. I think Kevin O'Connell. I think about Kirk Cousins. I think about JJ, Justin Jefferson. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of that, and that game is tonight. But we're not going to be talking about that. But when it comes to purple, John, it is interesting because this is a company that has gone in the exact opposite direction of a Sleep Number. Sleep Number, which is right here in Minneapolis, downtown Minneapolis headquarters. They do a great job. They've got a great balance sheet. They still have earnings and everything that you'd want in a company, but they've struggled just like everybody else throughout a pandemic. Not everybody's going out and grabbing everything. But I will say this, Purple, on the other hand, well, they've got a free cash flow that's not a flow. It's a flow out, and they're losing about 140 million, you know, and then you look at the market cap, it's gotten crushed all the way down to 360 million. Is it worth a shot? Maybe, but they've got to turn this thing around, and it's not going to be easy.
Nope, not going to be easy, and there's so much competition, Pete. Yeah. These are these mattress in a box companies, and there's great ones like Helix and, you know, Lull and a host of others. But yeah, this one is just bleeding cash, so I'm not touching it. Luckily, I wasn't in it on the way down, and I'm not playing for this bounce. Right. What about Wix, Pete? This is a cloud-based company that helps people build websites. And Starboard Capital, Starboard Value actually, apparently took a 9% stake. So it's seeing a nice little pop today.
Yeah, it was a $200 stock, John. It got all the way down to 61 at the end of August. And here we are in the low 80s, 81, 82, something like that. Israeli company. I will say this. I have something about it over time. I've just lost trust for the rest of the world. I hate to say that, but I have, John. So when it's a company that's somewhere outside of the U.S., I always get a little bit nervous about it. I understand what Starboard's looking at here. They think they can make something out of it. They think that the margins can be improved. They think this is a company that can make money. And all of that makes sense. That's why the stock's getting the pop that it is today. But I'm going to stay away from this one too, John. I just, you know what? If it's not U.S. based, I don't have time for it. I've had too many bad experiences, specifically with China. But China's not the only one. There's South America as well. I know there's a lot of great companies in Israel, quite frankly, but I'm going to steer clear of this one. I'm still waiting for the companies that make money, that do all of the right things. They've got great free cash flow. You look at the balance sheet, it makes sense. You look at the hierarchy up from the CEO on down. If that all makes sense, then I get a lot more interested. But this, unfortunately, being an Israeli company, I'm going to probably slide to the side on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's still almost $5 billion company, Pete. So I think it's real. I don't know how they're going to make a lot of money. You look at the PE and it's not there.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I would take a pass on this one. What about XPEV, Pete? Now, you just said I don't really trust Chinese companies, but this one is one of those EV makers out of China that really has been doing a great job. Now, today, the reason that they're seeing a pop is that they have self-driving cars and they're basically putting them out there to test them out.
Yeah.
So be careful if you're a pedestrian in the areas where they're testing. But nonetheless, these guys are not exactly nipping at Elon Musk's heels, but they're definitely ready for some self-driving tests in a way that most people aren't.
Yeah, it's really an interesting company, John. They actually do an excellent job. I think a lot of those EV makers in China are doing a great job, as you said, but they are in China. And that's when I usually stay away. When I say stay away, I'm talking about stock. You can still trade options in any of these things, whether it's down in Brazil or wherever. Israel doesn't matter to me. China, Japan, wherever you want to go. I'm all in as far as being able to trade the options. I just don't want to get stuck in a stock that suddenly that nation decides we're going to change some sort of rules or whatever. That's the part that bothers me most. But yeah, John, this is very, very interesting what they're doing. I'm with you though. I'm going to, if I'm on the sidewalks anywhere near where I know that pilot program's going on, I'm getting off the sidewalk because it's a whole test that they're going through, and they're going through the whole autonomous side of the world. I mean, every single aspect of it. Literally, you get in the car, you could pass out and sleep in the car. I'm not so sure I'm excited about that. And whatever happened to be 16 years old and wanting to drive a car, John? What happened to that? I mean, it's absolutely dumbfounding to me. And my own children, they stand in that opposite category of me. And my son drives a car where it virtually keeps him as far away from the next car as he wants. He can do this, he can do that. And I look at these guys and I'm like, and what the hell? Didn't you want to drive when you turned 16? I know you did.
Yep, I did. This is one, Pete, that I do own, XPEV. I own the options, just like Pete said. I still see more upside for companies that are in the EV space. How about Take-Two Interactive, Pete? The first time I saw this today, I thought it would be down 10% or more like that.
Yeah.
Basically, some hacker got in there and basically got some footage of the Grand Theft Auto 6 or whatever. Turns out, though, no source code leaked. It was just somebody that somehow over his friend's shoulder or whatever was able to steal some scenes from it. I don't think that's the same at all as getting some source code and then putting it out and having them lose a bunch of money on the sales or the revenue side. So I don't think this is as bad. It's fought its way all the way back from a big sell-off. So I think this storm may have passed, just like the storm down here in Puerto Rico.
Well, I don't disagree with you, John. And the stock reaction, I think, signifies exactly what you're saying. I think the thing that we have to focus on here, though, is forget Take-Two for a second and all these gamers and all this other crap. Think about this for just a moment. Cybersecurity. Now, the whole world will tell you, well, you got to go to Palo Alto. Oh, you got to go to Zscaler. Oh, you got to go to all this BS. You know where you go? Look for cybersecurity at Microsoft. The stock has not traded well for a long time. It's really struggled. But you know what they do really well? Everything. And one of the things that they do is cybersecurity. And these guys went from 10 billion revenue in 21. Now it's 15 billion revenue now, John, is the estimates for 22. This is a company that does all these other great things, but not everybody knows and focuses on the fact that Microsoft also has this big security arm. I think that's going to be something that's going to push them in the future. It's why it's not just about cloud anymore. It's about all these other aspects that they're jumping into. It's why Satya Nadella is one of my favorite CEOs. I know the company's struggling. Maybe now's a good time to start looking at Microsoft, though, because of this. And I think cybersecurity is going to be a big, big, big deal going forward.
Yep, can't deny that, Pete. I also wanted to flip over into unusual activity because Kanye West famously said last week, Pete, that a king doesn't live in another king's castle. So he said he was breaking ties with Gap stores, GPS, and the stock reflected the drop that somebody with Yeezy's pull could impact shareholders and value. However, today, Pete, they're buying the weekly calls that expire Friday of this week. So when you and I are down at RebelCon Friday, these calls expire. They're the 950 calls. They're literally the at the money call. They only paid like 18 to 20 cents for them. I like the play. And if you want a cheap shot at a bit of a rebound into Friday, doesn't get much cheaper than that, Pete.
Another great opportunity out there, John, when I jump onto mine is I usually don't like to steer towards those ETFs. And oftentimes if I see an ETF trading, I'll just figure out a different way to trade it to get a little bit more beta out of the trade. But in this case, I don't want to confuse everybody. I know not everybody watching understands the options world, so I'm going to stick with XLF, and that's the financial ETF. What makes this trade interesting, John, is it's actually trying to get a little extra leverage into the trade because of what they're buying. They're buying this week's expiring 32 calls. Now, the stock is trading close to 33. So they're paying a little bit more than $1 for these calls. The actual amount of value there is, call it $1. They're down an extra 18 cents. So not too dissimilar from your trade, but they're going deeper into the money and they're trying to get that leverage for a nice run out of the financials for the rest of this week. I think that is a possibility. I think it's something that potentially, depending on how the reaction really comes from the Fed, and we'll find out pretty soon, but when we get that reaction, will we get a little bit more of a bounce out of the financials? That's what they're playing for here, and that's why they're using the leverage that they've got. I think it's a really interesting trade. I like this one a lot. I'm in a lot of different financial names. If I was going to go away from XLF itself and not trade that, John, I'd probably use something like a JP Morgan. They've got a pretty good chunk percentage-wise of the XLF, so that's kind of one of my go-tos oftentimes when I'm going to go to something other than the ETF itself.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Pete. That's the only banking stock I own right now is Jamie Dimon's shares, JPM. Yeah. So as many of you know, Pete was on the sidelines for the Nebraska Oklahoma game. Tough one for Nebraska, great one for Oklahoma. But he also has a sports talk radio show every Sunday from 10 a.m. until noon Central Time on the Odyssey Network and WCCO. So every week on the Rebels Edge, a couple times, 3 times a week, we talk about what Pete's seeing as far as big sports headlines. What's the big thing you're focused on this week, Pete?
Well, and you and I can kick this around a little bit, John, but I mean, obviously, when you're looking at the NFL, I think you've got those that are real and those that are posers. And we can kind of break that down. What makes Tampa, in my opinion, a real team right now that has a chance to go a lot further and have a great record and all the rest of that. We're not saying everybody's going to go to the Super Bowl, but who's real right now that we're watching? The reason I think Tampa's one of those teams is Tom Brady's got almost no offensive line right now. He's got a lot of guys out, nicked up. Some of them have had to leave, all the rest of this. And he doesn't have a whole lot of help, and he doesn't have Gronk. So they're winning with defense. And that's something that not always is the case, but Tampa does have a great defense. They're doing a great job with that. And I think that that's why I would put them in the real category. I'm going to go on a little bit of a limb here and say the Dolphins are another team, John, that I think is real. I think what they did last year and what they've done with Tua and what Tua has done as their quarterback so far has been extraordinary. And yesterday, anybody who had a chance to watch a fourth quarter, the Baltimore Ravens always have great defense. We know about Lamar Jackson. That's what we hear most about. But the one thing you and I know as former linebackers, they play defense. Well, they didn't do it very well yesterday because Tua had 5 touchdowns. He threw 4 of them in the fourth quarter, I think. So I think that that's a team where the offense is finally clicking, and Tua has finally gotten himself into a great groove. He's got Tyreek, as you and I were talking about. He's got some talent around him. And I think that makes it pretty great. The last one I'll give you too, John, on the poser category is, I hate to say it because I like this team, but the Tennessee Titans, I can't figure these guys out. We're going to find out tonight what their deal is, but there's no A.J. Brown, John. That's a problem for them. They got no Julio Jones. They've got a quarterback who's probably at best very average, but, you know, he does a decent job. Derrick Henry's great, but if everybody knows Derrick Henry's going to get the ball, you know what you do? You stack the line and you go after him, right? So
Yep.
If they're one-dimensional and that's all they've got, that's a real problem. So that's why I'm putting them in the poser category. We'll find out a lot more tonight.
Right. Well, Pete, quickly, San Diego almost did it, or the former San Diego. Now they're the LA Chargers, I guess. Yep. But they almost did it against Kansas City, but Mahomes was just too much. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can't throw a pick six like that, Pete, right. And win, because when you're coming down and you're knocking on the door and that flips 14 points or at least 10, that's one of the reasons that Kansas City was able to pull that off. Mm-hmm. All right. So what about some college football, Pete? There were some pretty good games. I saw a great Hail Mary by Appalachian State that I loved. I tweeted that because that was one of those where it wasn't just tipped in the end zone. The guy caught it on like the 5, had to back up a little bit and then run to the corner to get it.
The guy was completely out of the play and came back into the play. It was great. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was the perfect execution, really. But, you know, John, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, because what I like to call this segment is don't sleep on these teams for the national title. And the first one would be USC. Here's part of the reason. Not only do they have a great coach in Lincoln Riley, but, John, the guy went to the portal and he basically created an all-star team. And there's so many, I'm going to read them to you. You got Caleb Williams, the quarterback from Oklahoma. He transferred over. You got Travis Dye from Oregon. He transferred down. You got Austin Johns. He transferred down from Stanford, running back. You got Jordan Addison. Oh, by the way, last year, he won the best receiver award in college football. So the Biletnikoff. So you got him coming from Pitt. I mean, they've literally built themselves a near championship team by doing what they did. And I also like Kentucky, John. I like the Stoops brothers. I had to play against those guys in college. They were all at Iowa. I was at the University of Minnesota. They knew what they were doing. And this particular Stoops, Mark Stoops, is the winningest coach in Kentucky history for football. And so if you ask him, it's no longer a basketball school. I tend to agree with them. I think these guys are becoming a football school in the SEC, and what they've shown so far against very modest competition, let's be honest. But they beat Florida, and you know what? They beat Florida in the swamp. So that's saying a lot. I think this Kentucky team is for real as well.
Yeah, I watched that game, Pete. I'd say you're right about that. And, you know, you and I talked briefly about Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten, how good they look. You know, I guess they're going to have to take a page from the playbook of USC when USC joins, because that is just like when Oregon was doing that, Pete, with the run and gun and the no huddle offense. Yeah. Everybody had to copy them. I think they're going to copy using the portal like USC effectively has used it. Yeah. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us. Please, you know, you're going to see our handles. Please send us a little love, thumbs up, and so forth. And we're going to be back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I'll be back later today for 3 at 3. Pete will be back tomorrow, preceding us with The Take at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Enjoy, everybody. Bang!
Giddy up.